Hi there, it's Richard Little from Your Land Partner. We're in the second video of a series of 8 talking about how we secure deals, how we suggest that you secure deals, and all the alternatives are open to you. We're on actually number 42, I think, out of 100 or something like that. So it's still a fair way to go, but obviously where we're at in the process is we're still on securing deals. So we're almost halfway through, and actually, and this is sort of, you know, almost to the point, and we will be halfway through by the time we've got to securing the deal. So half of the effort, if you like, is all at the front end, and that sort of relates pretty much to a lot of development projects. It's the projects and the profit and everything else is made at the front end, not the back end. Back end is maybe getting a little bit of extra margin or whatever, but it's actually the deal is all set up at the front. Anyway, right, that's not what we're talking about tonight, so sorry. So we are talking about option agreements. So option agreements have been around for centuries, in point of fact. And those of you that don't know what an option agreement is, it's an option to purchase with no obligation. So we are looking at a piece of land, for instance, and we have an agreement with the landowner, we have an option agreement with the landowner that over a set period, say maybe 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, option periods can run for any amount of time, that we will, if we fancy it, purchase that piece of land for a possible known or unknown price at some point within that period. So when you explain it like that, it doesn't seem such a good deal for the landowner. And there are less and less options being done now because overall, from our experience, and we have been to the landowner side, but we mostly come from the developer's side, it isn't such a good deal. There are option agreements that can be framed, can be written, can be structured from the point of the landowner and also those from the developer's perspective. So many pieces of land will still go out through this route because it's been done for many years and lots of people are quite comfortable with it. The fact that we don't actually use it that often, we've got one on our desk at the moment, and that'll be the first one we've done for a few years. It's just not what we do. Our preference generally is working through what we call a promotion agreement, which we're going to talk about on another video, and included in that promotion is something called preemption, which gives us the chance to purchase. So not quite an option, but almost an option. Or the alternative to us is even better right at the moment from our point of view is conditional purchases. So the one thing an option, overarching option doesn't really give much certainty to the landowner. It doesn't really give them certainty. It can give them a certainty on price, but there's no certainty on whether that's going to be delivered or not. And they don't really have that much control over the time either. As I said before, option periods can be from any amount. It can be 3 months. If we see much point over 3 months, but it can be from as little as both parties or all parties agree to as long as all parties agree to. So we've had option agreement within the family that's been around for virtually 30 years. Now, some of the land has been sold in various tranches. It's part of a massive development of hundreds of acres, and so the option probably was the only real way to do that. Certainly 30 years ago, when this stuff was being these agreements were being sorted out, but. One thing I want to say for those of you that do options and those of you that are considering options is don't underestimate the time. Now, from a landowner's perspective, and they'll often be represented by a third party, possibly a land agent or a valuer, and they're perhaps a legal team or whatever. So you'll often be negotiating, not necessarily direct with the landowner. And so, they'll be looking for a shorter time as possible. whereas from the developer's point of view, they're looking for as long as possible. Now, that period of time from the option agreement may well be giving you the time to get planning consent, because most land that is transacted through using option agreements doesn't have planning. Now, it can still work on land and the property that has planning, but less so normal. So that period of time, as I say, it's down to negotiation. So what you really want is a situation where it's long enough for you to perhaps get the planning that you want. It may well be that it's a long planning play whereby there is no possibility of permission at the moment, but you're hoping there might be permission in 5 years or 10 years or something. So you'll be looking for a much longer option. Period. You will also make sure that in the option agreements that there is some clause in there for extension. You know, it could be related to maybe if you've already started perhaps the planning process and it hasn't come out the other end, you may well have some automatic right of, say, 12 months extension. That's less likely in options than it is in promotion agreements, but it can still be agreed. And the other thing really then is you can have right of extension, but it will then be a fee. So an option can only take place if there's fee. So you have to have money that changes hands. Now, there are, and there's certainly in the past, and there's still a few, but less so now, of where a lot of money changes hands in order to secure the option. So you will pay an option fee. You might pay 20 grand, you might pay £200,000. Depends how desirable that piece of land is. We typically pay £1. That's the minimum you can pay. Because we're investing our money, we want to keep our money and investing in the planning process generally to get to a quicker execution of the options, effectively a quicker completion, so that the landowners get their money much sooner. So there is a fee, and if there is an extension, now even exchanging on an option agreement at £1, if we agreed, say, 3 years, and we also put a clause in there that we have the right to extend for perhaps another 2 years, then there will be a fee, and that fee will be set again, and generally you might want to give a bit more of a carrot at that point. So you're probably not going to do it for another £1. You might, depending on the scale of the project or the size of the land, etc. It might be 5 grand, it might be 50 grand, it might be whatever it is. But so the point about this is for extensions you generally have to pay a bit more money. So the family land that we were talking about that sort of goes on for the best part of 30 years, it's been subject to extensions that, because we're only a very, very small part of a big part, if you like, a small part of the jigsaw, we don't really get much say in it. This was all agreed up front. So if they reached a certain point and they purchased part of the land, then they automatically got so on. And this is what happens on large scale development with the volume builders that are basically getting it together and they carve it up. That's a discussion for another day. Nothing wrong with that. That's just the way it works. But from the point of view of allowing enough time. So if you are looking at actually, putting forward a proposal for an option, then you're going to have to put a time frame on. So if it's something that you are looking for planning to gain planning consent on, then you need to make sure that within that option agreement you have allowed sufficient time to do all of your pre-planning work and the planning process to go all the way through potentially to appeal. Now, we all know that planning can be lengthy and frustrating. So it's how long you allow. So we see quite a lot of option agreements. I've got to be perfectly frank with you now. We see quite a lot of people that are new to development signing up options, and they get it so badly wrong on the timing. It's their single biggest weakness generally. So they either haven't allowed enough, and we see so many options at 12 months without necessarily an automatic right to extension. We see some at 2 years with no automatic right to extension, and it's just not enough because if the planning takes you a little bit long, and then you've got to do something with it. So the key thing that you need to do with your option is make it assignable. So that effectively means that if you end up not buying it, you can trade the option on so somebody else can buy that land. Because people will use lot option agreements for the point of getting planning uplift and then selling that on. As I say, our preference is to use a promotion agreement, which is very, very much more weighted to much more evenly, but we'll discuss that on another occasion. You need to make sure that assignment condition clause is in there so that you've got that ability. But what we see quite often is people allow themselves 12 months or even 2 years where they think they're covered. They're going to get the plan in and they're just going to sort of move it on. Well, what they've got to allow for is, as I say, all the pre-planning work, all the design, all the surveys, all the reports that need doing. And then perhaps a pre-app process and then the planning application process. But if they don't like it and you've got to come back out and you've got to tweak it, etc., time just ticks on. And then if you eventually get planning consent without actually going to appeal or anything like that, which obviously lengthens the process by 6, 9, 12 months or more, then you're still starting to get tight on that 12 months. And then if you've then got to go out and sell it to somebody under assignment, then you might run out of time. And once you start putting it out there that you're selling something under assignment, it's an option, you're going to possibly come across some people that are a little sharp, and they might help or hinder you in terms of running the clock down, and then they'll have had discussions potentially with the landowner, and you might be disappointed if you were looking to say, I don't know, you've got an option agreed at 600,000, you're going to spend perhaps 50,000, 60,000 on getting planning, and you hope to make, £300,000 or £400,000 in the uplift. There's quite a lot of margin there that the people that you introduce that you hope will help take the assignment off of your hands with the uplift. Then you might find that they're going to go and talk to the landowners and say, I'll tell you what, we'll give you £100,000 more than that person's given you. Let's just run the clock down. Don't allow them to extend, etc. So just be mindful of that. Okay, I'm not saying it's always going to happen, but it'll happen a lot more than you probably hear about, and people would admit, and people wouldn't talk about it. So you've got to be really, really sort of careful on the timing. I think the other thing to add here is that you can agree options with other clauses. So we can look at overages. Again, I think we've discussed it before, but we'll discuss it in much more detail in one of these videos of 8. I think how best to use it and how not to use it, etc., etc. But you can use overages in terms of perhaps a base value for the option, say £600,000 for the land, but actually if we achieve perhaps more planning than we're looking for, or we achieve a better value for it, then you will get some more. So you can use overages on that. It depends what is the part of the negotiation. It depends what the landowners are looking for, or what they're advised on, etc., and what you're looking for as well. So really, I think the if you're using overages, you are setting a value. But if we're looking at an option that might be for 5 years, do we really know what the value is? So it is possible to agree an option based on valuation, based on market valuation at the time. Now, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? It depends. It depends where the market's going to hit, etc. So the point about this is there are so many different clauses that you can put in with options. Our advice really is to keep them as clean as possible with a certain price. That's what you're going to pay. You might have, as I say, some form of overage to say if you got planning for X, Y, or X plus, whatever it might be, because often you'll be talking about overages. You're not necessarily going to be talking to the landowners or their agents about what it is you're looking to get on there. But we find that when we're talking with the landowners and their agents, etc., that some element of transparency is quite useful. If you're talking about, well, we're going to put 20 houses on that piece of land, so we're going to agree an option of, say, 20,000 a plot, so we're going to pay you £400,000 over the next 3 years, or possibly during the next 3 years, and you're going to go and get 30 or 35. When that option agreement is framed up, and when it's actually put to their lawyers, then people are pretty smart now, and they will normally pick up on there. They're normally going to protect their clients, their landowners, so you're going to likely to have a bit of to and fro in. So what we find is if you try and if you try and disguise stuff early on, or try and keep too much stuff from landowners for early on, when you get to the tricky part of the legal stuff, where you think all the negotiations are done and everything's just well, these little points will come up, and you can easily lose credibility, because it could very well come out and say, well, why didn't you mention this before? So just be very mindful. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using options, and I know quite a few people that use them reasonably well. But I would say that most of the people we know that are quite new to them get badly burnt sometimes, and which is a bit of a shame. So just be very mindful, as with any agreement. So make sure that you've got good legal advice, good legal people on your side, and actually you also want the other party to have good legal advice and experience, because if you get one side, one side of the table effectively is very experienced and the other side isn't, it can take an awful long time, and you end up having to explain loads of stuff, and it's just really, really much better if everybody around the table understands what they're talking about. And that's why I come back down to, if you try and get away with stuff, if the other party has somebody smart, you're probably not going to get away with it. And there's so many option deals that get agreed by a shake of a hand, etc., never happen, because the legal process. There are so many option agreements, in my view, fall away a lot more than conditional purchases or promotion agreements. But that's probably I could have a debate with a number of people that possibly will watch this and maybe get in touch, or maybe not. So absolutely is a place for them. I don't think there'll ever not be a place in the development space for option agreements. We just got the one on the table at the moment, but hey, that's okay. From our point of view, if we could get an option, it generally favours us, so we will. But because we don't work quite like that, it's not our agreement of choice. But that doesn't mean to say that people don't do very, very well out of options. But just as a last repeat, just be very, very wary on what you're agreeing to, what the conditions are. Make sure that you allow yourself enough time, that you can get an extension should you need it without costing you a fortune. It may well be nothing to do with planning consent. It may well be to do with perhaps uncertain times and the market's tipped a little bit, so actually you might struggle to finance it, so you can't actually buy it. So you could have invested 50, 60,000 or 200,000 in our case in some projects in planning, and then end up with a situation, the option's running out, can't buy it, can't even afford to pay 20,000, 30,000 because the cash flow's dried up for an extension. So, just be careful. But as I say, you should always be careful anyway. So this has been Richard Little from Your Land Partner. We've been talking about securing deals using option agreements, hopefully giving you a little bit of a balance, a bit of good and a bit of not so good. And we will be talking to you again very soon. Take care.